Welcome, everyone, to the Toy Tomb. Today, we're going to be talking with an author of this incredible book, A World Without Reality, Inside Marvin Glass's Toy Vault, by Mr. Bill Paxton. And I've got Mr. Bill Paxton on the line right now. So how you doing?
Hey, Willie, I'm doing great. Great talking to you.
Oh, yeah. I've been going through this book that you sent me. One word for this book. Amazing.
Well, thanks.
There is so much stuff in this book. There's stuff I didn't even know about that I'm learning about in this book. I'm really enjoying this crazy thing. It's a really good book.
Yeah, and it it covers the decades from the 40s to 80s, and so there's so many classics that are covered in it. There's really something for everybody.
Oh yeah. What got you interested even to work in the toy industry?
Well, right out of school, I got a job, in the Chicagoland area. Marvin Glass was from the Chicagoland area,
yep.
And although when I started in the industry, it was just a couple years after they closed down. But anyways, I started in the premium industry, coming up with toys, games, and puzzles for inside cereal boxes or fast food companies, but mostly cereal box toys. And that was awesome. It was so much fun, and the turnaround was coming up with an idea and making it and having it hit shelf and get a commercial. It was like just a 6-month turnaround, which is exciting because in the retail industry it's like 2 years. Year and a half. But anyways, I worked there for a while, and then I worked at another place in Chicago. I wanted to then go into retail, doing bigger things, stuff that's in the toy industry, Toys R Us, stuff like that, mechanical, bigger things. So I worked at London Company, which is an independent toy invention studio in Chicago. And he used to work for Glass, and so he would tell me about, people there and some stories. And after that, I worked for BMT, which stood for Breslow, Morrison, Terzian and Associates. They're the ones, those three guys, Jeff Breslow, Howard Morrison, Reuben Terzian, were partners at Marvin Glass. And so when Marvin Glass studio closed down in '88, they took their favorite designers, inventors, office personnel, and model makers and started their own company, BMT, which now stands for Big Monster Toys. Anyways, I've been working there for the last 20 years, and what's great there is you really hear all the stories. Jeff Breslow, Howard Morrison, and Reuben Terzian, they came up with stuff like, Simon and SSP and Evel Knievel Stunt Cycle and games like Ants in the Pants and a lot of different things. But anyways, working there with the model makers and designers that used to work for Glass, they tell me stories of how the classic items and toys and games were really made, and the stories behind each one, which were completely different than what you would, read on the internet. They had all the inside stories, which were much more exciting than what anybody knew about. But anyways, so that was kind of my journey in the toy and game industry, and it was, it's very intoxicating. Just coming up with an idea and making a prototype and then pitching it to the companies and eventually having it on shelf.
Have you had some toy ideas that made it out to the shelf?
Oh yeah. Every year. Let's see. Recently, X-Ray Vision Supergirl for Mattel. That won a Mattel Girls Toy of the Year award.
Wow.
Well, I work in all different categories. For example, boys' toys, girls' toys, preschool, games, many different things. But let's see, I did a whole line of Dancing Polly Pockets. I did a Big Trouble game. Recently, Imaginext Chomping Monster Raider for Fisher-Price. It was this big pirate ship with a shark jaws in the front, and just a lot of different stuff. What I think a Papa Zit game where you can put silly string in there and you're pushing down on the zit and you're getting sprayed with silly string or water. You know, and another thing for Imaginext was like the Imaginext Tentaclor was this big purple Cyclops alien. Just you know, a lot of stuff.
Oh man, that is pretty cool.
But being around and hearing all the stories of Marvin Glass Studio from the people who worked there, and knowing that the industry that I've always worked in, you know, I'm beholden to Marvin Glass because he created in the 40s the whole concept of independent toy invention studios, meaning instead of before that, it was just the regular companies like a Milton Bradley or a Parker Brothers or an Ideal or Marx or, you know, whoever at the time. They would just come up with their own ideas. What Marvin created was the idea of a studio filled with all these people from all different walks of life coming up with the ideas that couldn't be made from inside a company because so much, you know, it takes so much time and effort and energy, and they're usually very unique ideas that are left field ideas, you know, or very mechanical or multiple motors, or, you know, they did incredible things. Anyways, he came up with the entire idea of just coming up with a prototype and then going to the different companies and trying to get a percentage. So here, you make it, and you pay me a royalty for each unit sold, and that whole concept never existed. And all independent toy studios owe him a debt of gratitude. And what most people don't realize is probably around half, if not more than half, of all the classics that have been on the shelf for decades and decades and decades were from independent toy invention studios, you know, who then presented it to a Mattel or a Hasbro or an Ideal, and they made them, but behind the curtain, it actually went through Marvin Glass. It was created, the idea and concept and prototype was made at different toy invention studios throughout the years, but from the 40s to 80s, it was mostly Marvin.
Yeah, that's one of the things that my co-host and I have found out doing this show is a lot of the classic toys that we really, really love came from Marvin Glass.
Yeah, well, and here's like some of them, for example, Rock'em Sock'em Robot,
oh, yeah.
Operation, Simon, Mousetrap, Hands Down, Tippet, Mystery Date, Light Bright, Yakety Yak Teeth, the Pie Face game, which just, was resurrected again. It was originally done at Marvin Glass in the 60s. Ants of the Pants, Toss Across, Witch Witch, Gnip Gnop, the Blythe Doll, Stay Alive, Tumblebug, the Fake Vomit, Whoops. They used to do a lot of novelty stuff too. Tumblebug, let's see, Super Specs, the Inchworm Ride-On toy back in the day, the Jaws game, Tin Can at the Alley, but other stuff like, Mr. Machine, which was very big at the time. Evel Knievel Stunt Cycle, SSP Racers, Smash Up Derby, and then, stuff that was big in the 60s like Robot Commando, King Zor, but even like the Tapper Video Arcade games. They had their own arcade. They would come up with arcade games also. So Tapper was done there. The first entire line of Voltron, the Animal vehicle, just, the list goes on, but most of those that I just said are still on the shelf in one form or another.
Yes.
I mean, it's incredible.
Well, when you got a really good toy design, it's going to last.
Yeah.
That's for sure. What initially got you inspired to do this book on Marvin Glass?
Well, so through hearing the stories throughout, the decades, and the stories were, just fun and wacky and exciting because it was like, it was a crazy studio. Marvin was wacky himself, and real, but he surrounded himself by crazy people too, and eccentric. So anyways, throughout the years, all these people that I knew created these toys or contributed to them and had the stories to tell, they started passing away. And year by year, some of the most important people started passing away, and the stories just died with them. And so I had previously written a book about a 1920s middleweight boxer, a biography, and so I had written before, and I just assumed somebody else was going to write a book about Marvin Glass, but it's a daunting task. But anyways, what really made it something I had to do was when they were passing away, I had to document these stories because all the important people were passing away. And so I'm like, okay, it's now or never because the stories are being lost. And I had to search out and interview for the book around 100 people.
Wow.
And we're talking, designers, model makers, employees, partners. There would Marvin had like 9 other partners. He started it with himself, but then throughout the years would have other partners. I interviewed family members and clients, and so the list was around 100. But finding them was not an easy thing. You're trying to find somebody, from 60 years ago, and but anyways, so that alone took years. But then I interviewed people, recorded them, had it transcribed verbatim, and so all the stories are really true and accurate, and you get a really great picture of the book is a biography of Marvin, the man, the studio, and including the employees, but also of the toys and games that were created there.
Wow. How long did it take you to do all this for the book?
It took close to 10 years.
Wow.
And, the interviews alone, it's not like you can just pick up a phone and call somebody. These are people that that alone took like 3 or 4 years to find the people and interview them, because you're dealing with, I had to get all the patents, and then you have a name on a patent from somebody that worked there maybe for 3 or 4 years in the 40s or 50s or 60s. They have since moved out of state or to other countries, or if they were female, they'd be remarried, and then, there's nowhere to search. And so I had to puzzle piece by puzzle piece, link by link, finally find them, hunt them down, and interview them. And everybody was so happy to be interviewed and share their stories. But only through, once in a while when there are books, they'll interview 1 or 2, maybe 3 people that worked there. But this is the big picture where it's 100 people, and you really see all the different puzzle pieces are put together to get the clear picture of what it was, how fun and exciting and wacky it truly was. And
Well,
Marvin was such a secretive person. It was, he didn't want any of this stuff. So stuff that was like, throughout the years, he'd be interviewed at magazines and newspapers and on TV shows. And, it was all, he was such a showman. He would say things that weren't necessarily true. And so to really get the truth of what's really going on, you really have to dig deep and talk to all the people that knew him and the toys in the studio firsthand. Interviews took 3 or 4 years, and then it was the research of all the items, and then writing it, and then, getting it to press.
Wow. Did you have any interesting revelations during your research?
Yeah, some things were kind of, were hinted at or rumored, but then when I got the real stories, it was really a surprise. I knew that he had his quirks and that he was secretive, but I didn't know why and to what extent. For example, I interviewed, for example, Eddie Goldfarb, who's created Yakety Yak Teeth and many other things. He went on to do, after working at Glass and going on his own, he invented Kerplunk and battling tops and many other things. But anyways, and he's like 96 now, or 97.
Yeah, we interviewed him too.
Through him and many other people, including family members. What surprised me was Marvin's mother was brought to an insane asylum, committed, because of the child abuse that she inflicted on him. And when I say child abuse, I mean attempted murder. I mean, she was nuts. She was crazy. And it ran in the family. And so what's also told is there was some sort of mental disorder that ran in the family. Some people had it, some people didn't. Some people had it at varying degrees. And creativity ran in the family. For example, he had an uncle, Theodore Glass, that was a very famous painter in the 60s and 70s. But he also had, uncles that were also committed, and his mother was, and I'll let the people read the stories, but they're pretty. He was scarred for life, as any of us would be after this stuff. And the father was a salesman that was never around at home, and then kind of abandoned him. So anyways, here's Marvin, who his mom is, brought to an insane asylum, and his dad just abandoned him and just went on his own and didn't want to deal with having a kid. And so he was raised by his aunt and uncle after she was committed. But anyways, through that trauma, he then would get phobias and disorders that he suffered through his whole life. For example, he had a fear of flying, a fear of being alone. He suffered from insomnia. He was a hypochondriac, and his paranoia and super secrecy. All this stuff was directly in response to what he suffered at the hands of his mom, and that is explained. For example, if you're dangling out of a window and your mom's pushing you out of a window, it's very understandable. You could be afraid of heights, things like that. But anyways, what really surprised me is how strong-willed he was. A lot of that stuff, to be so exceptional of a person, to create an entire industry that didn't exist before him and not let it shackle him. And this is why he was so secret. starting an entire industry, you're really you're trying to get people to believe in you, and you're selling yourself. And so the last thing you want to do is have people know about this, sordid history, which he hid very well. And in his entire career, nobody really knew. But he just refused to let that shackle him for the rest of his life. And so he led an exceptional life and died relatively young, around 59, 60, with being able to accomplish everything that he did without, with the burden of his past, and to be so kind and funny and such a showman and playful, and he's quite exceptional.
Wow.
But that was a surprise to me.
Yeah, wow. Did you have a favorite toy growing up?
I liked them all. But I do remember, I really wanted, Evel Knievel was really big, growing up in the 70s. And I really wanted an Evel Knievel stunt cycle. And I remember my parents, got me, other motorcycle toys that were not the Evel Knievel stunt cycle. And I'm like, no, this isn't the Evel Knievel stunt cycle. This is connected with a string. It's going around in a circle. This isn't it. So anyways, and then I finally got one. And I just loved that, the Evel Knievel stunt cycle. It was awesome, which is another Marvin Glass item. And I loved the Witch game. Just, as a young kid, it created this great atmosphere. You really felt like you were there and different things were going on. And another Marvin Glass item, and still on the shelf today as Ghost Castle. When it came out in the States, it was Witch, but overseas it's Ghost Castle. And and Simon, and, a lot of Marvin Glass items. But I didn't know it at the time.
It is amazing to learn a lot of your favorite toys growing up did come from the mind of Marvin Glass.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Where's the best place that people can find your book?
Well, the easiest place, now it can be purchased at itascabooks.com or Amazon, but the easiest way is to go to its website at www.marvinglassbook.com, and there you'll have links to where you can buy it. There'll be information about it and pictures of the different pages. One thing to keep in mind, it's very big, but it's not just text, as you know from your copy. It's over 1,000 images. We're talking photos of the rear prototypes, and over 1,000 images that are including not just original photos of the items, but also images of the ads and patents and TV commercials, Glass family photos, internal company promotional images. There's special appendixes in the back of the book. Anyways, this stuff can be informed if you go to marvinglassbook.com. You'll get more of a sense of what's in the book and what's it about and where to get it. That's where people could find it. And then there'll be links to, you just go to Amazon.com or Itasca Books is where you could get it.
Awesome. Besides the toy company you work for right now, is there another toy company that you've had interest in?
Well, now there's toy companies and toy invention studios. So as far as toy companies, the manufacturers, the Mattels and Hasbros. Well, historically, Marx was awesome. I really loved Ideal. I liked Ideal because it was very eclectic and wacky, and just had that awesome 60s craziness of stuff some stuff that's awesome, and some stuff it's like, what were you thinking? It was so flawed. As a toy inventor, we look at some of this stuff and it's like, you see the kernel of what was good, but then you also see the flaws of why it's still not on the shelf. But I just loved Ideal, but there were so many. So that's, from the companies of the past, that's, who I tend to gravitate to.
So what advice could you give someone that's wanting to get into the toy design business?
Well, there's a couple schools that people can go to on the coasts. Now, they weren't around when I grew up, but also it tends to, now people tend to be industrial designers. My advice is just dive in, knock on doors, make sure that you're passionate and excited about it, that you're, an idea person, and, persevere, and, passion is a lot to do with it. And so I would say just go for it and get a taste for it, and just dive right in.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk to me about your book. It was really, really awesome to hear about this.
Oh, it was great. It was great talking with you.
Oh, boy. Yeah!
Hey, there's Hasbro. Hasbro makes toys. What's new, Hasbro?
Pretty sneaky, sis.
Remember, you can tell it's Mattel. It's
Okay, let them go. Some of the great SSP racers for 72.
M-A-R-X spells Marx, world's largest toy maker.
Remember, every boy wants a Remco toy.